Detectives scour the neighborhood tonight looking for information that'll lead them to the person that left two full-term babies in a garbage can.
Chill right down my spine.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This video is going to be another crime and opinion video. I'm going to be discussing a cold case that was recently solved with the help of DNA and the use of a new technology. This is the same technology that helped to catch the Golden State Killer. Now, this crime happened 18 years ago. It took 17 years to solve and was just recently solved in December of 2020. Now, let's go back to June 6, 2003, in Holland, Michigan. A garbage collector was on her usual route, picking up garbage. And I'm sure some of you have seen the garbage trucks driving through your neighborhood, on garbage day. Some of them pick garbage up at the back and some will do it at the front. And she happened to be collecting or using one of those dump trucks that you would, use the lift at the front to dump the garbage in. And as she dumped garbage from a specific garbage can, she thought she saw the body of an infant drop, go into her truck. Now, she must have been very observant because, to tell the truth, if I had seen that, maybe I would have just thought it was a doll that a family had thrown out, they no longer wanted. But her curiosity got the better of her and she went and she investigated. And there was not only one, but there were two bodies that she found of newborn babies. And they knew they were newborns because the placenta was still attached to one of the babies. So she used her cell phone and she called 911. They came out and they started to investigate right away. Now, the police went door to door, to people in the neighborhood to question pregnant women or, just everyone to find out, do you know someone who may have been pregnant or who just had a baby that you don't see anymore, or they were pregnant and you no longer see them pregnant and there's no baby to show for it, kind of thing. But the case it went cold right away. There wasn't much information. While they conducted the autopsy, they did take DNA from the babies and had that on file. And during that autopsy, they found out that the babies were born alive and later died of asphyxiation, which is basically suffocation. Now, they weren't able to determine whether they were killed or they died before they were thrown into the trash or after, like while they were in the trash. And like I said, it took 17 years for them to solve. But back in 2018, after the Golden State Killer was found by the use of this new DNA called Genealogy, investigators who had the case at the time decided to reopen the case. And even though they reopened it in 2018, it still took them, until 2020 to solve it. So what genetic genealogy basically is, it's because all humans, our genetic makeup is very similar. And you know what? I'm going to find a clip of a video and insert it here so the professionals can explain it to you much more better than I can. But that's what they used, and they finally narrowed it down to a specific woman that they thought could have been the mother of the twins. But they still needed her DNA to test to make sure. So they came about, someone by the name of Antoinette Briley, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And they staked her out, basically. because they needed her DNA instead of getting a warrant kind of thing to put her on alert, because DNA testing takes time. So they didn't want to put her on alert and then she decides to run off or do something stupid or whatever. So they just watched her, and she was a smoker. So one day when she discarded the butt of her cigarette, they picked it up and sent it out to get tested immediately. And that's probably why the case took this long to solve, 2018 to 2020. When the test came back, it was a definite match. They pulled her over during a traffic stop, and she freaked out, like she was in tears. They took her into the police station and they began questioning her, and she confessed immediately. I mean, there wasn't much, she couldn't deny it. I mean, she could have, but the DNA doesn't lie. Okay, so during questioning, she admitted to what she had done. She told them that she had lived about 1.5 miles from the scene where the babies were found. And that day on June 6, 2003, she was alone at her grandparents' house when she went into labor. Now, it's not clear if she knew she was pregnant, or she knew she was pregnant, but she knew she didn't want these babies from the get-go, because it doesn't seem like she seek medical care. So that day she's home alone. She went into labor, she was cramping, she was bleeding, and she decided to go into the shower to, try to ease the pain. And while she was in there, she gave birth to the first baby. That was a successful birth. He came out fine. And the second baby, after she gave birth to the first one, she still felt like there was pressure, like they were still cramping, there was still pressure. And she gave birth to the second baby. And she said they were crying. So, she proved that, yes, they were born alive. They were crying, but they weren't crying loud enough for anyone else, within earshot to hear. So the neighbors wouldn't have heard anything. And she said she panicked, and she just put them in a duffel bag, and she was going to drive them to a hospital to make sure that they were okay. So 911 was in operation back then. We're in 2003. You could have called 911. She didn't do that. She put them in a duffel bag, said, I'm going to drive to the hospital. And then on the way to the hospital, she changed her mind. Because she figures, okay, well, no one knew I was pregnant, so no one was going to know that I gave birth. So she just took them and dumped them in the garbage. After she did that, she went home, took a shower, cleaned up, and got into bed and watched TV. Now, I've given birth 4 times, so I know how labor is. It's traumatic, it's painful. And not necessarily traumatic in a bad way, I guess, but you're out of it. Because I remember when I gave birth to my first child, my first daughter, I was in the hospital, and the next day, my doctor that I've been seeing for months before came in. And I'm looking at her, she's looking at me, and I had no recollection of who she was. I looked at her and I'm like, oh, you look familiar. And she's like, yes, because I'm your doctor, honey. And I'm like, oh, And also during labor, while I was pushing, I asked the doctors, I'm like, could I take a break? Could I have a break? And they're like, no, honey, you're going to suffocate the baby. You're going to kill the baby. So I know labor is hurtful. It's painful. And you're worn out at the end of it. So at first, when I heard about this case, I'm like, okay, maybe she freaked out. She was out of it kind of thing. But the fact that and she drove.
Police are reviewing a videotape taken from this surveillance camera mounted on the side of a house. The tape, obtained by ABC7 and turned over to police, documents the comings and goings on one side of the alley. It shows a car pulling in, stopping just out of frame for about a minute, then backing out during the roughly 10-hour period. Police believe the babies were abandoned.
If I didn't say that before, she drove the car. The fact that you got up, put the babies in the duffel bag, and drove to where you dumped them and then drive back home. I mean, like, come on. Come on. You know? And for 17 years, like, did she think about any of this? She never mentioned it to anybody. Or if she did, they never came forward to say anything. No one in her family knew that she was pregnant. You know? The father of these babies have never been identified. So I wonder how he feels now that this has been solved. I wonder if he knew that she was pregnant and just thought, oh, maybe she had a miscarriage or she... And that's another thing. This is 2003. Abortion is legal in Michigan up until 24 weeks, which to me, 24 weeks is about 6 months. So that's kind of, babies survive at 6 months. But nonetheless, it's legal and it was an option to her. There was also adoption. There's places in Michigan that you can drop babies off. So the hospital, the fire station.
So senseless, especially considering a relatively new state law that lets parents leave their newborn children at certain locations to avoid crimes just like this.
With the drop-off any place, hospital, police, fire, why do this?
So those were options that she could have taken. Instead of you carried a baby for 9 months, 10 months, and you give birth, and then you decide to kill the babies. That makes no sense. No sense. I would love to interview her and find out, like, what was her thought process back then? What's her thought process now? Did she feel any guilt back then? I mean, she never came forward and admit anything. Did anyone in her family ever suspect that she was pregnant and me? Like, there are some women that are pregnant and don't know that they're pregnant until they go into labor. There are some women that when they're pregnant, they don't even show. So after all of this now, during the investigation, they found out that she was a single mother of a 12-year-old. So she did go on after this to have another child. And she worked at a factory as assembly worker. She worked 60 to 70 hours a week. And she was an active member of society, not a flight risk. These are things that her lawyer put out there because she was given a court-appointed attorney. So these are things he was putting out there to make her, I guess, to change the mind of the judge to let her out on her own, recognizance or whatever the word is, because she didn't really have a criminal record. She has been charged before, like misdemeanors, but nothing that were like felonies or anything. And maybe if she had been charged with a felony before, her DNA would have been taken and then been put into the system. So maybe this would have been solved sooner. But nonetheless, it's now solved. And all the articles that I read were from December of 2020. So she was granted $150,000 bail, bond. And she would need to come up with $15,000 of that to be able to be released. I don't know if she has been released because, like I said, all the articles are from December 2020. There hasn't been any recent ones that I could find. But I really feel it for her 12-year-old daughter because we know how kids are. She's now at risk of being bullied because the mother's picture is out there, so everyone's going to know. And the family, like, how does her family feel? Like, knowing that their daughter or their granddaughter or their niece did something like this. Twin babies. Not one, not that it makes it any different if it was just one baby. Murder is murder. But to go through labor, to carry these babies and to go through labor and then to just discard them in the trash like this. And these are things that happen a lot. In Ontario, at least 6 a month. And I know You know, that's the area that I live. At least about 6 per month, I believe I read. And we don't hear about all of them on the news. And not all of them get solved. But now with the advancement of technology, I'm hoping that, you know, a lot more of these cases will be solved. But let me know if you guys have heard about this case. What do you think about it? You know, leave a comment. Please like the video because it really helps out a lot. And if you have any case suggestions, put those in the comment section as well. And I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, I appreciate it. And I realize that a lot of you that watch the videos are not actually subscribed. Please hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. And thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.
How you guys doing? At least it's not too cold out today. We would be doing this outside. Notice how we're socially distanced. All right. We see it. Thank you. Are we good? Yes, sir. Matt, we good? All right, let me take this off. All right, good afternoon. Want to bring up a case that we're just finishing charging on and go over it with you. An extensive Sheriff's Police cold case investigation has led to murder charges against a Michigan woman for the deaths of her 2 newborn twins, which happened 17 years ago. Antoinette Briley, 41, of Holland, Michigan, was charged Friday with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of their sons. On June 6, 2003, the victims were discovered by a waste management employee who was emptying trash bins in the alley at a 4800 block of South Latrobe Avenue in unincorporated Stickney Township. She saw the bodies in the front bucket of her garbage truck. A subsequent autopsy determined that the victims were born alive and died of asphyxiation, and the deaths were ruled homicides. Sheriff's Police conducted a thorough investigation at that time, but the case remained unsolved. In 2018, Sheriff's Police reopened the case and utilized DNA from evidence recovered from the scene in an effort to identify the birth mother using the latest developments in genetic genealogy. A breakthrough from that research and subsequent investigations allowed detectives to eventually identify Briley as the victim's potential birth mother. As part of the investigation, Sheriff's Police detectives traveled to Holland, Michigan, and obtained discarded items with Briley's DNA, which was then matched to the DNA from the victims. On Thursday, Sheriff's Police learned that Briley was in Cook County and took her into custody after a traffic stop in Oak Lawn, Illinois. Briley was transported to the Sheriff's Police headquarters here in Maywood, where she admitted post-Miranda to her involvement in the birth, death, and disposal of the 2 deceased infants. Briley is scheduled to appear in court today, and a bond hearing was held. The public is reminded that the defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. There's a few things I want to mention. The people that worked on this case. First of all, I want to go back 17 years ago. The detectives and the police officers, the sheriff's detectives and the sheriff's police officers worked hard on this case then. It was never gone. It never was past us. The things that they did back then helped us today, because that genealogy, the things that we couldn't do back then, we could do today. So their hard work helped us solve this. Now, I'll tell you, from the sheriff down, and to me, I am proud of the work our detectives did, how they stayed on this, these victims. A murder happened 17 years ago. We don't ever give up. These detectives took it upon themselves to use today's technology, things that they got today, to get it done, and they did a great job. Detective Julianajules was the lead detective. Detective Leslie Pratt, Deputy Chief of Investigation Sean Gleason, Commander of Investigations James Davis, Lieutenant of Investigations Scott Lefko, retired detective Ronald Russell, who was here 17 years ago. He's here today. Detective Sergeant Hadari's here. Chief Marlon Parks, First Deputy Chief Terry Tabb, and Director Arunas Benitez. I just want to tell you guys, we are here today, and we are out here talking to you because this was a lot of investigative work, good work, done by our detectives on this. And I said it once, I'll say it again, I'm damn proud of them. Now, who else helped us on this? The FBI helped us. The Illinois State Police helped us. Cook County State's Attorney's Office. Northeastern Illinois Regional Crime Lab, where we put the DNA. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. The Wisconsin Fusion Center. And the Michigan State Police. This is everybody working hand in hand. That's what police work's about. That's what we did. And I guess we can go to questions then from there.
I know we all have a lot of questions.
Sure.
Did she say why?
Well, without getting too far into that, we'll have one of the detectives talk to you about that. But as for a reason, an apparent reason, like I did it for this reason, I didn't get any of that in the paperwork I've read so far.
So in terms of your all's investigation, and so did we know, what was her connection 17 years ago? Was she a resident in Chicago 17 years ago? And if not, did you all know that you were focusing on a suspect in Michigan?
We did not notice we were on a suspect in Michigan. That's all happened from the genealogy that the detective will talk to you about. We did ascertain that she lived within about 1.5 miles of where the bodies were dumped.
So you said that you guys got, learned that she was in the area in Cook County and Oak Lawn. Was she like visiting family or?
We knew once we had developed probable cause for an arrest, we were keeping an eye on where she was at and if she was coming back into Cook County. That's all I can really say about that now. But yeah, we knew when she was coming back.
Can you talk a little bit more as to the new testing with advanced technology, latest developments in the genealogy? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, our detective's going to jump up and talk to us about that. We can do that when we get into that. Are there any more general questions you'd want me to answer before we have the detective come up and talk to you about that? Because you're hitting it right on the head. The DNA and genetics, that's what made this case. 17 years ago, we wouldn't have made this case this way.
I have a general question.
Sure.
How unusual is this to solve a case that is 17 years old?
Well, I've been doing this a long time, and I've done some of the work that these are fantastic people have. It doesn't happen all the time. It's usually good, hard work. I've seen it happen in places, but just think about going back 17 years. You know, how much gets dropped off. There might be people that you interviewed back then that are no longer here or findable. It's tough, and that's why we're bringing it to your attention. This is great work by the Cook County Sheriff's Police Department, the detectives that work there. People behind me, I'm just telling you, I was watching them doing it. They were doing great. So thank you for that question. Anything else?
And just continue to move as these developments were made. I mean, I'm sure it's a little bit more nuanced because on one hand, there's a celebration for development, but on the other hand, it's still the loss of two very, very young innocent lives.
2 twins died 17 years ago. We handled the case back then. We felt the void because we couldn't find out who did it. But the thing is, with police and following up, we never give up. And you can see they took it upon themselves, knowing that we can run DNA in different manners today, to do that, and they did it. So yes, 2 infants died 17 years ago. Okay.
Would you mind saying your name and spell it just in case someone looks at this later?
Okay, it's Leo Schmitz, Chief Leo Schmitz, Leoschmitz. Okay. All right. DNA question. What was the DNA question? Okay. Ginny, want to come up and handle that? Let me grab that. That starts blowing away. Just put some.
Can you start with your name and your title?
Detective Ginny Georgantis.
Spell it, please.
Ginny. Last name is Georgantas.
Can you talk a little bit more as to the new DNA testing? Obviously, 17 years ago, technology and testing wasn't as advanced as it is now. What helped you guys, or what technology is it, or testing is it?
It's investigative genetic genealogy, where a familial DNA profile is developed from DNA and uploaded into a database. It's an open source database called gedmatch.com. We had contracted Parabon Nanolabs to assist us with finding the birth mother of these babies.
What made you all focus on this case in 2018? Was there something that led to that?
Yes, sir. It was a Golden State Killer case. Broke through genetic genealogy. It was the first case that was solved through genetic genealogy. So I had approached the Deputy Chief of Investigations, Sean Gleason, after that happened, and asked him if we could open the case. He said yes. So we had then, the Sheriff's Department supported us in contracting Parabon Nanolabs.
So you kind of got the ball rolling on this. So how do you feel knowing that it's resolved in this way?
I feel I'm happy that there's closure for the twins. You know, there was nobody fighting for them. So I am happy that, you know, we'd identified who did this to them. And it's kind of a surreal feeling.
Detective Georgantis, I just want you to explain the request for.
There you go.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just want you to explain a little bit more of the process. I can imagine all of our viewers saying 17 years, why did it take so long? And so if you could allow me to play devil's advocate for a moment, what talk about your process. Why 17 years in dealing with something like this? Was there no family member or relative or friend who says, hey, this woman had 2 kids, we knew she was pregnant, and now these 2 kids are gone or they're missing? Nobody sounded the alarm?
Here, let me answer that one. We didn't know. We didn't know back then. We had no idea at that time who these kids were tied to. So it's almost, they're thrown in that garbage can. The waste management, the woman that was working for waste management, great job identifying that, or we would have never knew this happened. Interviews, we did, back then, looking back, we did multiple interviews up and down the block, you know, checking, doing canvases, but we didn't get anything back then. That's why this case now jumping that way is so good. And let me bring up Deputy Chief of the Detective Division, Sean Gleason. Sean, you can answer some of those questions too.
My question for you, when you get settled, what can you tell us about the suspect? Is she a mother? Did she have more kids? Did she have other kids before this incident? Married? Have you reached out to other of her family members?
We've, to answer your question about, she does have a child, yes. She has a daughter. We are continuing the investigation. We are talking to everyone that we feel would have been related to her and trying to find out as much as we can to keep this thorough investigation going.
Do we have any leads on what a potential motive might have been?
Motive for the offender to do this? I believe that's going to come out in court, most likely. I wouldn't want to comment on any of that right now.
When she was arrested, can you talk about her state? Was she surprised? I mean, how after 17 years, she probably thought she's going to get away with this.
Yeah, my description was she's distraught, definitely emotional. Yes.
Detective, if you don't mind, can you just look directly into our cameras and specifically say what is your appeal to, I guess, folks even in other states, since you all had to work through other states to go through this? I'm still baffled by the fact that these are 2 kids. Nobody sounded the alarm. If somebody in my family was missing, I would say something. Other folks would say something. And so can you speak to that a little bit more?
I agree. It's human to think that way. We had a tragedy. I can't describe it more succinct. We have a tragedy of 2 newborn infants dumped in a garbage can, dead, and no one comes forward. We worked as hard as we could to get to this point, to get to this day, to where we're at. A tragedy, absolutely a tragedy.
Are there other cases where you all are looking at DNA and trying to use the new technology to solve some of your past cold cases?
I think we have to do that now, and with the success that we've had, and looking at nationwide how it's happening, it's inspiring for us to have this and know that we can turn to this as a tool going forward.
This same kind of technology that led to this latest development and that led to the Golden State Killer developments. Have we seen other cases being cracked as a result here in Illinois due to the same technology? Is this among the first?
I do not know the answer to that.
I can
sorry.
answer that one. There are cases being worked now, not just by the Cook County Sheriff's Department, but by other departments within the state of Illinois. Yes, we're going backwards on cases now that we had DNA, and not to get too far into it, but there's a consumable amount of DNA, and we got to make sure if we're doing these cases, we do them the right way. But there are other departments that are actually doing what we're doing now on cases that they've dealt with. No, I couldn't give you a ballpark, but having known or talked to other people that do this, we know that other people are doing it too. This case being pushed by this, and there'll be other cases, absolutely, you guys will be hearing other people doing the same thing, cases solved this way. But once you get this information, then the interviews that our detectives did were fantastic. Detective Leslie Pratt and Detective Genealogy, they did an excellent job interviewing on this. And not only it is the DNA end, the genealogy end, and the things that we're going to be doing 10 years from now that we're not doing today, it always takes into consideration the hard work that the detectives do. You still have to make a case, and you still have to talk to people. And they did an excellent job of that. And I just want to let you know that for the last few weeks, just watching them work up there, it was a joy every day to hear what they're doing. So that's why we're here.
What's the status of the daughter?
I couldn't hear you, ma'am.
The status of the daughter. You said that this woman has a daughter.
Yeah, we can't speak about her daughter. As far as we know and everything we've seen, she's fine and no problems with her. From the limited information we got. The investigation, just so everyone knows, is ongoing.
To your knowledge, does this suspect, does she have a criminal background? Is there a little bit more that you could give us on just her background?
Well, in this case, yeah, that's a decent question. It's not extensive. It is an extensive background. No felony arrests. A couple of misdemeanor arrests. But that's it. Nothing that you would rise a level. I know what you're thinking. You know what I mean? That's something you'd want. Yeah, right. I got it.
One or two more. And when was she taken into custody? When was she arrested?
Is it Thursday? Thursday. It was Thursday in Oakland. Yeah.
And she still has family ties here, still has folks here?
Yes.
Apparently that's why she was here.
Yes. Family ties here and there. We good, man?
Just one more question. With the genetic genealogy, so with the DNA evidence that you guys have, do you guys put it into the system and then it comes up with a profile?
CODIS, and you can look that up. Something you'll be using a lot in the future because we do. The CODIS system is how the DNA hits. Okay, we appreciate you guys coming out here, and I can't say it enough. From the sheriff to all of us, we're very proud of our people and what they did, and more importantly, we're glad that those two twins, it's been resolved, and we have found out who killed them. So, thank you.
Can we get your name? I don't think we got your name.
Terrence Tam.
Oh, sorry. The gentleman
My
behind.
name's Sean Gleason, SeanGleason, like Jackie Gleason.
Okay. One last question. Any idea on the father?
It's ongoing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.